A leather notebook hit the floor along with a tiny memory card, and both would unravel the perfect order of a family that seemed untouchable. He grabbed my wrist, hissing, "Don't touch a man's business in this house." But the numbers in that notebook, wire transfers, coded symbols, told me otherwise. This was systematic crime. I'd planned to stay silent to keep my mother safe, but after that blow, the law would speak for me, and that memory card would be the explosion. My name is Grace Whitaker, and I never imagined at 33 I'd be sleeping in my childhood bedroom again, staring at faded glow-in-the-dark stars while my mother's new husband counted money downstairs. Marlow Springs looked exactly like the kind of place where nothing bad happens. Tree-lined streets, gleaming shop windows, neighbors who actually waved. My mother Diane had landed here after meeting Calvin Mercer at a grief counseling group. Both widowed, both searching for second chances. Within 18 months, she'd become Mrs. Mercer, mistress of a colonial revival that looked torn from a real estate magazine. Calvin ran the Mercer Hope Foundation from a converted carriage house behind our home, helping sick children across Statefield. The bronze plaque read, "The local paper loved him. Chamber of Commerce Man of the Year." Twice, at charity galas, he'd work the room with practiced ease, that silver fox charm drawing checks from wallets like a magnet. At home, different rules applied. "Grace, did you move my reading glasses?" His voice would slice through dinner conversation, accusatory before I could answer. "They were right here, right here." "I haven't touched." Then they walked away themselves? He'd turn to my mother. "Diane, we've discussed this. Personal boundaries." Mom would flutter, recalibrating. "I'm sure they're in your study. Honey, Grace, maybe check if you—" I didn't touch them. But I'd already learned the script. Stand up, search for glasses that were probably in his jacket pocket, apologize for their mysterious relocation. The financial control started subtle. Joint accounts became complicated after I moved in post-divorce. "Just until you're back on your feet," Calvin assured, managing a concerned frown. "No need to burden your mother with multiple household budgets." My engineering salary from Halcyon Dynamics went into an account he'd helped set up. I got an allowance. He actually used that word. Transferred weekly, enough for gas, lunch, approved purchases. Any deviation required justification. "What's this charge at Office Depot?" He'd wave a bank statement like evidence. "Printer paper, for my resumes." Lying. The paper was for documenting his behavior, but I couldn't admit I'd started keeping records. "Resumes?" His eyebrow would arch. "I thought Halcyon was treating you well." "They are, because instability concerns your mother." The implied threat hung between us like smoke. Mom had developed a kind of selective blindness. When Calvin snapped about dinner being too salty or too cold, she'd apologize and remake it. When he reorganized her closet because her system lacked logic, she thanked him. The woman who'd raised me to be independent had somehow dissolved into grateful acceptance. The notebook appeared that first week I'd moved in. Black leather, expensive looking, always within his reach. He'd write in it during phone calls, quick sharp strokes that looked more like code than words. Sometimes I'd catch fragments of conversation. "Transfer to Silver Lark LLC. Processing fee. Administrative overhead." Once, while clearing dinner plates, I glimpsed inside. Columns of numbers. Company names I didn't recognize. Dates circled in red. He slammed it shut so fast the pages crackled. "Privacy, Grace. It's a fundamental—" "Sorry, just collecting your plate." "Were you reading my—" "Calvin, she wasn't—" Mom's voice, pleading. "Grace, maybe announce yourself when you approach the table." That night, she knocked on my bedroom door, sat on my bed like when I was 12 and Jimmy Morrison had called me ugly. "He's particular," she said, "but he's good to us. The house, the stability. I couldn't have managed alone after your father." "Mom, you were managing fine." "Was I?" Her fingers worried the bedspread's edge. "The bills, the maintenance, being alone. Calvin handles everything now." He handles everything, I repeated. She heard criticism where I'd intended observation. Her spine straightened. He's helping countless sick children. Grace, his foundation. I know what his foundation does. Then show some gratitude. Not everyone would welcome an adult stepdaughter into their home. His home. The correction lodged in my throat like a stone. Later, I heard them talking through the walls, his voice low, reasonable. She's been through trauma. Diane, the divorce, classic displacement of anger. She's not angry, she's just adjusting, I understand. But boundaries prevent resentment. Structure helps healing. My phone buzzed. Text from an unknown number. Your mother deserves peace. Respect the household. I deleted it, pulled up my laptop, started a new document. Incident log, day 15. The leather notebook sat on his desk like a taunt, and I wondered what secrets warranted such careful protection. At Halcyon Dynamics, I spent my days tracking anomalies, inventory discrepancies, shipping delays, system bottlenecks, patterns that shouldn't exist but did. The same instinct that made me good at my job started firing at home. Calvin's charity galas followed a predictable rhythm: big event, local media coverage, donation pledges announced with fanfare, but the foundation's public financial reports, required by law, posted on their website, told a different story. Money came in waves, but the outflow trickled. Processing delays, the reports always noted. Administrative overhead. I started my own tracking system. Yellow legal pad hidden in my laptop bag. Dates on the left. Observations on the right. May 15th. Gala raises $73,000 for pediatric ward equipment. June 30th. Hospital newsletter thanks donors. No mention of new equipment. July 10th. Calvin purchases new Audi. Claims foundation lease for donor relations. The Silver Lark LLC name appeared everywhere once I started looking. Vendor payments, consulting fees, management services, always amounts just under $10,000, the threshold requiring board approval. My cube mate at Halcyon, Derek, noticed my distraction. You debugging code in your head again? Something like that. Well, stop. You're making that face you get when the warehouse sensors go haywire. But I couldn't stop. Each public record I pulled revealed new threads. Silver Lark's registered address, a mailbox at a UPS store, its listed manager, someone named J. Smith, probably the most fake name possible. One evening, Calvin left his notebook on the kitchen counter while taking a call upstairs. Mom was at book club. My hands shook as I flipped it open. Phone camera ready. Pages of meticulous entries, not full sentences, just fragments. Hartley Industries, $50K commitment, 15% processing. Pediatric Wing Phase 2, redirect to SL. Site planning costs. Board member Whitfield asking questions. Schedule lunch. I photographed 12 pages before his footsteps creaked overhead, slammed it shut, busied myself with dishes. He returned, picked up the notebook without a glance my way, resumed his call. Yes, the storage facility at Westlake, Unit 417, climate-controlled, very secure. I wrote it down on my palm with a pen, transferred it later to my hidden notes. The foundation held monthly transparency meetings, Calvin's way of keeping major donors happy. I attended one, claiming interest in understanding the family business. He couldn't refuse without looking suspicious. The conference room smelled like leather and coffee. Donors sipped wine while Calvin presented slideshows of smiling children, construction plans, pledge thermometers creeping toward goals. Everyone applauded his dedication. Question, I said during Q&A. The Phase 2 pediatric wing shows as fully funded 6 months ago. When does construction begin? Silence. Calvin's smile never wavered. Excellent attention to detail. Grace, we're navigating some zoning complications. Better to move slowly than waste donor funds on false starts. Murmurs of approval. Of course Calvin was being cautious, responsible. After the meeting, he cornered me by my car. That was inappropriate. I asked a simple, "You undermined my credibility." His voice stayed level, reasonable. The parking lot was empty. Your mother is proud of our work here. Why would you want to upset her? I'm just curious about. Curiosity. He stepped closer. Not threatening, exactly, just close. You know what happened to the cat? That night, Mom was cold at dinner. Calvin must have shared his version of events. I became the ungrateful daughter trying to sabotage her husband's good works. She didn't say it, but disappointment radiated from her like heat. I kept collecting evidence anyway. Screenshots of public filings, photos of documents Calvin left out, a spreadsheet tracking money in versus money out, the gap growing wider each month. The call that changed everything came at 2 a.m. I was up anyway, laptop glowing, when Calvin's voice carried through the walls. The shipment arrives Thursday, Westlake Storage, Unit 417. Have them use the loading dock after 10. Security does rounds at 9:30. Shipment? The foundation dealt in donations and disbursements, not shipments. No receipts, cash handlers only. The less paper trail, the better. I typed every word into my phone, time-stamping each entry. Whatever was happening Thursday night at Westlake Storage, it wasn't about helping sick children. My reflection caught in the laptop screen, hollow-eyed, hunched over like some conspiracy theorist. But the numbers didn't lie. Somewhere between donation and disbursement, millions had vanished into Silver Lark's phantom accounts. And now Calvin was taking cash shipments in a storage unit. The leather notebook held answers. I was certain, but touching it again meant risking everything. My shelter, my mother's happiness, maybe more. I saved my files to 3 different cloud drives, password protected and encrypted. Then I made a decision that would cost me dearly. I would get into that storage unit. The cat had been curious. True, but it had 9 lives for a reason. The rain started around 3 that afternoon, turning Marlowe Springs into a watercolor painting. I'd called in sick to Halcyon, claiming a migraine. Mom was at her volunteer shift at the library. Calvin should have been at the foundation until 6. I needed Mom's medication schedule. She'd been mixing up her blood pressure pills, and her doctor had called asking about missed refills. The schedule, she'd mentioned at breakfast, was in Calvin's study, in his organization system. His study door was never locked. Why bother, when fear worked better than deadbolts? The notebook lay open on his desk, rain pattering against the window like nervous fingers. I should have just looked for the medication list, should have walked away, but those columns of numbers pulled me in. Westlake 417, Thursday pickup confirmed, $300K cash, processing fee $45K to SL, $300,000 in cash. My stomach twisted as I photographed the page. Then another showing disbursements. Board member Whitfield, reminded of daughter's scholarship, question ceased. The front door slammed. I shoved my phone in my pocket, frantically scanning for Mom's medication schedule. There, tucked under a paperweight. I grabbed it just as footsteps pounded up the stairs. Calvin filled the doorway, rain dripping from his coat. His face was a mask I'd never seen before, beyond anger, into something colder. Step away from my desk. Mom needed her medication schedule. Step away. I held up the paper, evidence of innocence. She called this morning, confused about. He crossed the room in 2 strides, grabbed my wrist, not hard enough to bruise. Calvin was too smart for marks that showed, just enough to communicate ownership. What did you see? Nothing. I just needed. What did you photograph? The phone burned in my pocket. I didn't. His free hand snatched the notebook, scanning the open pages. His grip tightened. You think you're clever, like your father. You didn't know my father. I know enough, Diane told me. Thought he was smarter than everyone. Look how that ended. My father had died in a car accident. Single vehicle, late night, bad weather. The implication hung between us like a blade. Let go of me. Delete the photos. I didn't take any. He released my wrist, shoving me backward. My hip caught the desk corner, sharp pain flaring. As I stumbled, reaching for balance, his hand came up fast. The slap snapped my head sideways. Not closed fist, nothing that would photograph as obvious abuse, just hard enough to ring my ears, split my lip against my teeth. I tasted copper, saw Mom in the doorway, grocery bags dropping from her hands. "Calvin!" Her voice cracked like thin ice. She was going through my private documents. He straightened his cuffs, calm returning like a costume, photographing confidential donor information. I didn't, but what was the point? Mom's face had already shifted into damage control mode. "Grace, how could you?" She moved to Calvin's side, not mine. "His work is sensitive. These donors trust their privacy." "Mom, look at the notebook. Really look. The money." Calvin closed it with a snap. "Is confused. Misunderstood. Diane. She's clearly having some sort of episode. The stress of the divorce. Living here. I'm not having an episode, but I heard how I sounded. Wild-eyed, lip bleeding, shouting about conspiracy theories." Mom touched Calvin's arm. "She didn't mean any harm. Grace, apologize." "Apologize?" The laugh hurt my split lip. "He hit me. I defended myself from an intruder in my private office." Calvin's voice was silk over steel. "Who was stealing confidential information? I could press charges." "Please," Mom's eyes begged me to play along. "Everyone just calm down. Grace, say you're sorry. Delete whatever you took. We can forget this happened." The notebook lay between us on the desk, in the struggle. Something had shifted in the binding. A thin edge peeked from the leather spine. Metallic. Tiny. A micro SD card. Calvin hadn't noticed. Focused on his performance of wounded dignity, I pressed my sleeve against my bleeding lip, used the movement to palm the card as I reached for a tissue from the desk. "I'm sorry," I said, the words ash in my mouth. "I'll delete everything." I made a show of taking out my phone, deleting the photos while he watched. Let him think he'd won. The real evidence sat in my closed fist, smaller than a fingernail and potentially worth millions. Calvin smoothed his tie. "I think it's best if Grace finds alternative living arrangements. Don't you agree, Diane?" Mom's silence was answer enough. I left them there. Calvin already spinning the story. Mom already believing it. In my room, I transferred the micro SD card to an old lipstick tube, hands shaking with adrenaline and rage. He'd hit me. In 33 years. No one had ever hit me. But he'd also made a critical error. The card was password protected. But I had time now. All the time I needed. Because Calvin Mercer had just declared war on the wrong woman. The micro SD card cracked open like Pandora's box. I'd moved into a weekly rental motel off Highway 47, the kind with cigarette burns in the carpet and a neon sign missing half its letters. But it had Wi-Fi and a deadbolt, which was all I needed. My laptop hummed on the particle board desk as decryption software chewed through possible passwords. On the third night, it broke. Mercer Hope 2021. So much for criminal masterminds. The files bloomed across my screen. Spreadsheets with transaction histories going back 5 years. PDF scans of doctored board meeting minutes. And videos. Dozens of grainy videos showing Calvin accepting envelope after envelope in what looked like the foundation's parking garage. One spreadsheet made my blood freeze. Donor insurance policies. A list of major contributors with life insurance policies held by the foundation as beneficiary. In case of sudden donor loss, the notes explained. My mother's name was there. Policy value, $2.3 million. I called Derek from Halcyon. "I need a favor. Can you verify some metadata without asking questions?" "Grace, what kind of trouble?" "The kind where I need to know if documents have been altered. Please." He sighed. "Send them. Encrypted." While waiting for Derek's analysis, I researched lawyers, not divorce attorneys or personal injury. I needed someone who understood financial crimes, who wouldn't be intimidated by Calvin's community standing. Nora Bell's website was sparse, professional. Complex civil litigation, nonprofit accountability, no case too entrenched. Her office was 40 miles away in the state capital. Perfect. "Let me understand," Nora said during our first meeting. her silver hair pulled into a sharp bun. "You have evidence of systematic charity fraud, but it was obtained without permission. After he assaulted me, which was reported to police?" I touched my healed lip. "No." "Photographs of injuries?" "No." She leaned back, fingers steepled. "The evidence itself isn't inadmissible. You were a household resident with arguable access rights, but we need corroboration, legal pathways to the same information. There's a storage unit, Westlake Storage, number 417. He mentioned cash shipments." Her eyes sharpened. "Cash shipments. Now that's interesting. Tell me about Silver Lark LLC. We spent 3 hours building a strategy. Nora had seen this before. Small foundation, big ego, minimal oversight. The criminal case will take time, she explained, but civil proceedings move faster. We can petition for asset freezing, demand emergency audits, file for protective orders. What about my mother? Is she complicit? She's blind, willfully or otherwise. Nora's expression softened slightly. We'll request welfare checks, document everything, if there's life insurance motivation. She didn't finish, but we both understood. Derek's report arrived that evening. Grace, these documents are dirty, timestamps altered, digital signatures copied and pasted, amateur hour. Honestly, whoever did this didn't expect anyone to look closely. I forwarded everything to Nora. Within 72 hours, she'd filed 6 different motions with the circuit court. The beautiful thing about civil proceedings? They're public record. Calvin found out when board members started calling. I knew because Mom texted. First time since I'd left. What have you done? I didn't reply, but I screenshot her message, adding it to my evidence file. Documentation had become my religion. The storage unit subpoena was approved on a Thursday. Nora insisted I accompany her, along with a court-appointed supervisor and the facility manager. I've never seen inside 417, the manager admitted, jangling his keys. Mr. Mercer pays annually, cash, very private. The padlock was substantial. Inside, fluorescent lights flickered over a treasure trove of criminality. Bankers' boxes lined metal shelves, each labeled with years and SL processing. A money-counting machine sat on a folding table, still dusted with blue dye from marked bills. In the corner, a filing cabinet held the real gold, original documents, the ones he'd digitally altered for official records. "Don't touch anything," Nora commanded, but she was smiling like a shark. "Chain of custody starts now." We photographed everything. The court supervisor sealed each box, initialing across the tape. In the bottom drawer of the filing cabinet, we found insurance documents, not just my mother's policy, but 7 others. 3 policyholder names had red X's drawn through them. I recognized 2 from obituaries over the past 3 years. "Nora," I whispered. She saw it too. This wasn't just fraud anymore. Back in the parking lot, she made calls. State Attorney General's office, FBI Financial Crimes Division. "We need criminal investigators here yesterday." My phone buzzed. "Calvin, you have no idea what you've started." Then Mom, "Please come home. We can fix this." Then an unknown number. "Your mother fell down the stairs, Marlow General Hospital." I showed Nora the messages. She grabbed my arm before I could run to my car. "That's bait. I'll call the hospital. Verify she's actually there. You don't go anywhere alone anymore." The hospital confirmed Mom was there. Minor bruising, kept for observation. The timing was too convenient, but at least she was safe. For now. That night, Nora emailed, "Emergency injunction approved. Calvin Mercer cannot access any foundation funds as of midnight. Personal assets frozen pending investigation. Protective order granted. He comes within 500 feet of you. He's arrested." I sat in my dingy motel room, staring at the legal documents. 5 years of meticulous theft, documented in his own hand. 3 suspicious deaths, a storage unit full of evidence he'd been too arrogant to destroy. All because he'd made me delete those photos. All because of one tiny memory card he'd never noticed falling from his precious notebook. The storage unit was a prosecution's dream. Federal investigators descended on Westlake storage like locusts, transforming the dingy facility into a crime scene. White vans, evidence technicians, photographers documenting every angle of Calvin's secret archive. "Ma'am, we're going to need you to walk us through what you observed." Agent Sarah Chen from the FBI's white-collar crime division had kind eyes but a voice that meant business. Every detail matters. I stood outside the yellow tape, Nora beside me, describing that first glimpse inside Unit 417. The money counter, the banker's boxes, the filing cabinet that held what Agent Chen called a murder-for-profit roadmap. The policies were all transferred to the foundation as beneficiary within months of major donations, I explained. Then those donors died? Heart attacks, car accidents, one fell from a ladder. Coincidences, Nora added dryly. That netted the foundation nearly $8 million over 3 years. The physical evidence was damning enough, but the paper trail was Calvin's real undoing. Original bank statements showed deposits that never appeared in public filings, contracts with Silver Lark LLC for consulting services that consisted of cash transfers, and a handwritten ledger, because apparently Calvin trusted paper more than pixels, detailing exactly how much he'd skimmed from grieving families' donations. $1.4 million in the past 24 months alone, Agent Chen murmured, flipping through photocopies. Where did he think this would end? Men like Calvin don't think about endings, Nora said. They think about empires. My phone had been buzzing all morning. Board members demanding explanations. Reporters sniffing for quotes. Mom, leaving voicemails that swung between accusation and pleading. Then a text from Derek. Local news just broke the story. You might want to see this. Channel 7's noon broadcast led with Calvin's Philanthropy Award photo, while the anchor intoned, "Shocking allegations rock Marlow Springs as the Mercer Hope Foundation faces federal investigation for fraud, embezzlement, and suspected insurance homicides." The hospital had discharged Mom that morning. I'd tried calling, but she wouldn't answer. Calvin's lawyer, because of course he'd retained counsel immediately, had already issued a statement about misunderstandings and a vindictive stepdaughter's campaign of harassment. "We need those original documents processed quickly," Nora told Agent Chen. "He's going to claim forgery, frame job, anything to muddy the waters. Our forensic accountants are already on it, but Ms. Whitaker," Agent Chen turned to me, "has your mother had any contact with you? She won't return my calls. We need to ensure she's safe, given the insurance policy situation." Ice filled my chest. "You think he'd actually—" "We think a man who allegedly facilitated 3 deaths for profit might not hesitate at a 4th. We're sending officers to check on her." But Mom wasn't at the house. The officers found signs of hasty packing. Calvin's study ransacked, and his leather notebook burning in the fireplace, half destroyed, but enough pages survived to match the handwriting in the storage unit ledger. "Destruction of evidence," Nora smiled grimly. "Add it to the charges." By evening, Calvin's assets were frozen solid. The foundation's accounts, his personal holdings, even the house, all locked pending investigation. Board members who'd been loyal that morning were distancing themselves by nightfall, issuing statements about shock and betrayal. I was reviewing evidence photos with Nora when Agent Chen called. "We found your mother. She's at the Rosemont Hotel downtown. Checked in under her maiden name." "Is she—" "She's asking for you." I found her in a suite that probably cost more than my monthly motel bill, sitting on a brocade sofa with an untouched room service tray. She looked smaller somehow, deflated. Grace, no warmth, no ice, just exhaustion. "Mom." "Sit, please." I perched on an armchair, maintaining distance. She noticed. "He's been moving money all day," she said quietly. "Calling people, making threats, promising payments. I heard him tell someone you'd had an accident soon." My blood chilled. "Mom!" "I found these." She pushed a manila envelope across the coffee table. More documents. donor files I hadn't seen. He kept copies here, at the house, including mine. Her life insurance policy, but also medical records. Annotations in Calvin's hand. Diane, heart condition, medication adjustment possible. Timeline, 6 to 8 months post-Grace elimination. She saw my face. I know what I refused to see. Why are you showing me this? Because, she straightened, and I glimpsed the steel spine that raised me. Nobody threatens my daughter. Nobody plans my murder over breakfast while smiling at me. Nobody— Will you testify? I'll do more than that. She pulled out her phone, showing me a recording app. I've been recording him for the past 6 hours. Every call, every threat, every admission he made thinking I was his devoted, stupid wife. For the first time in months, I saw my mother clearly. Not Calvin's victim, but the woman who'd rebuilt after Dad's death, who'd raised me alone, who'd maybe been playing a longer game than any of us suspected. Mom, I breathed. He's at the foundation office, shredding documents, he thinks, but I replaced his shredder with one Agent Chen provided. Every page is being digitally captured and transmitted. You've been working with the FBI? A ghost of her old smile. Since this morning, turns out I don't like being marked for death by my husband. Mom, I'm so sorry. No, she held up a hand. I'm sorry. I chose comfort over truth. Chose his lies over your concerns. But Grace, her eyes hardened. He's not going to win this. From the coffee table, her phone buzzed. Agent Chen's name appeared. Put her on speaker, I said. Mrs. Mercer? We have him. Caught destroying evidence. Recorded discussing plans to flee the country. He's in custody. Mom sagged with relief. I reached for her hand. Tentative. Uncertain. She gripped it tight. The storage unit evidence is preliminary processed. Agent Chen continued. Combined with your recordings and the documents Ms. Whitaker preserved, we're looking at federal racketeering charges, multiple counts of fraud, and 3 potential murder investigations. The leather notebook had held secrets worth dying for. But Calvin had forgotten the first rule of keeping secrets. The people closest to you are the most dangerous when betrayed. Calvin's press conference was a masterclass in deflection. He stood outside the foundation building in his $2,000 suit, flanked by lawyers, radiating wounded dignity. The local media ate it up. Their golden boy, their twice-honored philanthropist, claiming persecution. These allegations are not just false, they're vindictive, he proclaimed to the cameras. My stepdaughter, whom I welcomed into my home during her time of need, has manufactured evidence to destroy the good work we do for sick children. I watched from Nora's office, my hands clenched so tight my nails bit into my palms. She's struggled since her divorce, Calvin continued, voice dripping concern. Mental health issues, paranoia. I tried to get her help, but she became fixated on destroying my marriage to her mother, and by extension, the foundation that helps so many. Breathe, Nora commanded. This is what cornered rats do. They bite. But Calvin wasn't done. I invite any donor, any board member, any member of the community to examine our books. Full transparency has always been my policy. Interesting, Nora murmured, fingers flying over her laptop. Because I just filed our civil suit publicly. Let's see how transparent he feels about Exhibit A through Z. The court filing hit the digital docket at 2:47 p.m. By 3:15, reporters were calling. The documents were public record now. Every spreadsheet, every diverted payment, every suspicious death. Calvin couldn't claim fake evidence when it was entered into official proceedings. Nora had attached the FBI's preliminary findings as supporting documentation. Not the full criminal case, that would take months, but enough to show this wasn't one vindictive woman's fantasy. Local news pivoted hard. The 5 o'clock broadcast led with questions mount as foundation documents reveal financial irregularities. By the 6 o'clock showing, it was federal investigation expands into Mercer Hope Foundation. Board members started jumping ship. Dr. Patricia Worthing, pediatric chief at Marlow General, gave an impromptu interview outside the hospital. If these allegations are true, It's a betrayal of every sick child, every grieving family who trusted us. I've called an emergency board meeting to suspend Mr. Mercer pending investigation. Calvin's lawyers fired back with their own filing, a defamation suit against me for malicious destruction of reputation and intentional infliction of emotional distress. The irony wasn't lost on anyone who'd seen my split lip. "Good," Nora said when the papers were served. "Discovery works both ways. Now I can subpoena everything." Mom had moved back to the house, with the FBI's blessing and a security system they'd installed. She'd become their star witness, providing recordings, documents, and testimony about Calvin's private conversations. Her transformation from victim to avenging angel was something to behold. "The donors are calling," she told me over coffee in what used to be Calvin's kitchen. "They want their money back, all of it." "Can the foundation cover it?" "Not even close," she smiled, but it was sharp. "He spent it, cars, trips, investments in his own name, the house renovation, that ridiculous boat. They'll liquidate everything." "Everything." She sipped her coffee. "I've already filed for divorce. Nora's colleague is handling it. Did you know marital assets obtained through criminal enterprise aren't subject to equal division?" The emergency board meeting was public. Foundation bylaws required it. I sat in the back row of the community center, watching Calvin's empire crumble in real time. Board member after board member stood to denounce him. The vote to suspend him as executive director was unanimous. The vote to hire an independent audit firm, also unanimous. The vote to cooperate fully with federal investigators, unanimous. With one abstention, Calvin's golf buddy, who looked like he'd swallowed glass. Calvin sat at the defendant's table. They'd actually labeled it that. His jaw clenched tight. When the board chair asked if he had anything to say, he stood slowly. "This foundation has helped thousands of children. Whatever you think of me, don't let one disgruntled woman's lies destroy that legacy." One woman, board member Harrison, whose construction company had donated millions, leaned into his microphone. "Mr. Mercer, the FBI has provided documentation of systematic fraud spanning 5 years. 3 donors are dead under suspicious circumstances. This isn't about one woman. This is about you." The room erupted. Parents who'd received help stood to defend the foundation's work. Others demanded to know if their donations had gone to Calvin's pocket. One mother, whose daughter's cancer treatment had supposedly been funded by the foundation, waived hospital bills showing she'd paid everything herself. Calvin tried to speak over the chaos, but the board chair whiled him down. "Mr. Mercer, you no longer have the floor. Security, please escort him out." As 2 officers moved toward him, Calvin's composure finally cracked. He pointed at me across the room. "She destroyed everything. A vindictive little—" "Mr. Mercer," the board chair's voice could have frozen fire. "Leave, now." The room watched in silence as Calvin was escorted out. He paused at my row, staring down at me with such hatred I thought he might lunge despite the officers. "This isn't over," he mouthed. But it was. The foundation he'd built on lies was collapsing. The community that had crowned him king was sharpening its pitchforks, and somewhere in federal holding, 3 suspicious death cases were being reopened. I thought about his leather notebook. Now evidence item number 1 in a federal case. Such a small thing to bring down such a careful man. But then, avalanches start with a single snowflake. The federal courthouse in Statefield had seen its share of drama, but nothing quite like Calvin Mercer's civil hearing. He entered like he still owned the world. Pressed suit, power tie, that silver fox smile for any camera that would have him. His legal team formed a phalanx of expensive suits and leather briefcases. Across the aisle, Nora sat alone with me, a single box of documents her only ammunition. All rise for the Honorable Judge Elizabeth Hartley presiding. Judge Hartley looked like someone's grandmother until she opened her mouth. "This is a hearing on civil asset forfeiture and emergency injunctions in the matter of Whitaker versus Mercer and the Mercer Hope Foundation. Are all parties present?" Calvin's lead attorney, Richard Blackstone, stood. "Your Honor, we move for immediate dismissal. The evidence presented was obtained illegally by Ms. Whitaker, who was a legal resident of the household with reasonable access to common areas, Nora interrupted smoothly. Furthermore, the evidence has been independently verified by federal investigators. I've reviewed the FBI's preliminary findings, Judge Hartley said. Motion to dismiss is denied. Mr. Blackstone, you may present your client's defense. Blackstone launched into a performance worthy of Broadway. Grace Whitaker, vindictive, mentally unstable, recently divorced, living off her mother's charity. The evidence, fabricated or misinterpreted. The foundation, a pillar of the community being destroyed by one woman's vendetta. Your Honor, he concluded, my client has documentation showing Ms. Whitaker's history of erratic behavior, including these concerning search histories on her laptop. He produced printouts with a flourish. My stomach dropped. They'd hacked my computer? Nora barely glanced at them. Your Honor, those searches, how to document financial fraud, and whistleblower protection laws, were conducted after Mr. Mercer physically assaulted my client. They show a woman seeking legal remedies, not planning a frame job. Alleged assault, Blackstone corrected. Would you like to see the medical records from Ms. Whitaker's emergency room visit that night? Nora pulled out photos. Or perhaps the text messages Mr. Mercer sent threatening her. Judge Hartley's eyes sharpened. Mr. Mercer sent threatening messages? Nora presented printed screenshots. Calvin's words glared from the page. You have no idea what you've started. Your mother fell down the stairs. Accidents happen. Grace. The courtroom stirred. Blackstone's confidence wavered. Let's discuss the financial evidence, Judge Hartley said. Mr. Blackstone, can you explain the discrepancies between public filings and the documents found in Storage Unit 4SMT? Those documents were planted. By whom? The FBI has security footage showing only Mr. Mercer accessing that unit for 2 years. The forensic accountant will testify, Nora added, that the handwriting on the ledgers matches Mr. Mercer's exemplars with 97% certainty. What followed was a systematic destruction. Nora presented each piece of evidence like a prosecutor building a gallows. The diverted funds, the shell company, the insurance policies, Calvin's own notebook, partially burned but still damning. Then she played her ace. Your Honor, I'd like to submit Defense Exhibit 47, an email from Mr. Mercer's own account, sent 3 days ago to his co-conspirator at Silver Lark LLC. Blackstone shot to his feet. Objection! We haven't seen... Because it was provided by the Foundation's former bookkeeper this morning. Nora smiled. She received it as part of a group email where Mr. Mercer forgot to use BCC. Judge Hartley nodded. I'll allow it. Nora read aloud. Marcus, the situation is contained. Move the remaining funds offshore before the audit begins. The girl has been handled. She won't be a problem much longer. The email was dated 6 hours before Mom's fall down the stairs. Your Honor, Nora's voice carried quiet fury. This man systematically stole from sick children, possibly murdered 3 donors for insurance money, assaulted my client, and conspired to harm both her and her mother. We request immediate asset forfeiture and maximum protective orders. Calvin couldn't contain himself any longer. She's lying. That email was... I never... Mr. Mercer, Judge Hartley's voice could have cut steel. You'll have your chance to testify under oath, though I should warn you, perjury charges would add to your federal indictment. Blackstone grabbed Calvin's arm, whispered urgently, but the damage was done. Judge Hartley spent 20 minutes reviewing evidence, occasionally asking pointed questions that made Calvin sink lower in his chair. Finally, she looked up. I find sufficient evidence of systematic fraud, embezzlement, and credible threats of violence. All assets of Calvin Mercer and Silver Lark LLC are hereby frozen pending criminal trial. The Mercer Hope Foundation will be placed under federal receivership. She wasn't done. Furthermore, I'm issuing a permanent protective order. Mr. Mercer is prohibited from coming within 1,000 feet of Grace Whitaker or Diane Whitaker. Any violation will result in immediate arrest. Your Honor, Blackstone tried one last time. My client's reputation. Your client's reputation is a casualty of his own actions. However, I am concerned about the threats documented here. She looked directly at Calvin. Mr. Mercer, you should know this court takes witness intimidation very seriously. Any attempt to harm Ms. Whitaker or her mother will be met with the full force of federal law. The civil damages? Nora prompted. Granted in full. Ms. Whitaker is awarded compensatory damages for assault, emotional distress, and legal fees, the exact amount to be determined after full asset accounting, but no less than $500,000. Calvin's face had gone beyond pale to gray. His empire, built on stolen charity and dead donors, had crumbled in less than 2 hours. As court security moved to ensure Calvin left first, standard procedure with protective orders, he turned to stare at me one last time, but the hatred had been replaced by something else, the hollow look of a man who'd lost everything. The leather notebook sat in an evidence bag on Nora's table, its secrets fully exposed. Such a small thing to end a man's life as he knew it. But then, Calvin had taught me that himself. Little things, overlooked, could destroy kingdoms. I just learned the lesson better than he'd expected. The federal courthouse steps felt different this time. No rain, no drama, just finality. Calvin Mercer stood in his orange jumpsuit as the judge read the verdict. 37 counts of wire fraud, 6 counts of money laundering, 3 counts of conspiracy to commit murder. The investigators had found enough evidence to upgrade from suspicious deaths to homicide charges. The defendant is hereby sentenced to life in federal prison without the possibility of parole. Calvin didn't flinch. He'd aged a decade in 6 months. His silver fox charm replaced by hollow defeat. His lawyers had tried everything, plea bargains, character witnesses, even an insanity defense, but the evidence was overwhelming. The leather notebook alone had provided enough documentation to convict him 3 times over. As they led him away, he didn't look at me. I was glad. I had nothing left to say to the man who'd terrorized my mother and stolen from dying children. Outside, Nora shook my hand. The civil settlement's been finalized. $1.4 million returned to the Foundation's legitimate programs. Your damages award cleared last week. What about the families, the donors he killed? Wrongful death suits are proceeding. The insurance companies are cooperating fully. They don't like being used for murder schemes. Those families will see justice. Mom waited by the car, looking younger somehow. The divorce had been finalized months ago. She'd reverted to her maiden name, sold the house, started over in a condo across town. We had dinner every Sunday now, rebuilding slowly. You ready? She asked. One more stop. Marlowe General's new pediatric wing was beautiful. Sunlight streamed through tall windows onto colorful murals. Children's laughter echoed from the playroom. A bronze plaque by the entrance read, "Funded by the Mercer Hope Foundation Recovery Trust." Doctor. Worthing met us in the lobby. Grace, perfect timing. The families want to thank you. They don't need to. Yes, they do. You saved the foundation. Without your evidence, Calvin would have destroyed everything good we'd built. The conference room was packed. Parents, board members, hospital staff, they applauded when I entered, which felt surreal. 6 months ago, I'd been living in a motel, split-lip healing, terrified of a man who controlled my mother's life. We wanted you to know, Board President Harrison said, that every dollar recovered has gone directly to patient care. The wing you see, the new equipment, the treatment programs, they exist because you stood up to him. A mother in the back raised her hand. My daughter got her surgery because of what you did. The foundation was going to help us. Calvin promised, but the money never came. After he was arrested, the emergency trustees found our application and paid the bills immediately. How is she? I asked. Running soccer drills already. Tears ran down her face. She's going to be fine. We stayed for an hour, hearing stories, children who got treatments, families who received support, all the good Calvin had nearly destroyed in his greed. As we left, I touched the plaque one more time. The foundation would survive. Cleaner and stronger. The board had implemented strict oversight, external audits, full transparency. Calvin's name had been scrubbed from everything, but the mission continued. "You know what I still don't understand?" Mom said as we drove away. "The notebook. Why keep such detailed records of his crimes?" I'd wondered the same thing until Agent Chen explained it during trial prep. Men like Calvin believe they're untouchable. The notebook wasn't evidence to him. It was a trophy. Proof of how clever he was, how much he'd stolen, how many people he'd fooled. "Pride goeth before a fall," Mom murmured. That night, I stood on my apartment balcony, my own place, bought with honest money. No one else's name on the deed. The city lights twinkled below, peaceful and bright. My phone buzzed. Derek from Halcyon. "Saw the news? Drinks tomorrow to celebrate?" "Absolutely." Another text, from a number I didn't recognize. "Ms. Whitaker, I'm a prosecutor in Colorado. We have a similar foundation fraud case. Would you consider consulting?" I smiled. Maybe this was my new calling, using my engineering brain to untangle financial crimes, help other victims find justice. The leather notebook had started it all. One small object, fallen at just the right moment, revealing an empire of lies. Calvin was serving life in federal prison, his assets redistributed to heal the damage he'd caused. Mom was free. I was free. And somewhere in Statefield Federal Penitentiary, Calvin Mercer had all the time in the world to contemplate the price of his arrogance. No donors to charm, no money to count, no one to intimidate. Just a man who'd kept too many secrets in one small book, and the woman who'd brought him down because he'd made the mistake of hitting her. The notebook had held his secrets. But I'd held something more powerful, the truth. And the truth, as they say, had set us all free. Thank you so much for listening to this story of justice and courage. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Please share in the comments below so we can connect. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more gripping stories, and share your thoughts about Grace's journey. What would you have done in her situation?